Anything you're hooked on in terms of games of one kind or another? And let's get a professional view on this now from a gaming expert who recently wrote the Parents' Guide called Taming Gaming. That's Andy Robertson. So is addiction to games a serious problem?
I think anything you can do it too much. I don't think what I see is there's not a lot more likely to get addicted to games than something else. If you have addicted personality, perhaps you might play it too much. But I'm kind of often working with parents to try and kind of find a healthy middle ground. So although you might not be addicted to it, still, playing in excess is something that you want to guide as a parent.
So would you say the main danger is just that you're wasting a lot of your time, or does it have a more damaging side than that?
If you do anything to the detriment of other parts of your life, so if gaming means that you're not doing other things, like you're not going outside, you're not taking part in the other activities of the family, not looking after your health and eating, then, that's a sign that gaming has gone too far. But I think often in families, kind of actually the problem is that gaming happens away from the parents and actually can be quite a nice activity to do together. So what you're missing out on is actually a shared family time if you can get games to be part of family life. And again, that's kind of part of the work that I'm usually doing.
Are there similarities with other addictions? Do we know why it's addictive?
It's more similar to sort of a process addiction. So, most people who play too many games, or the children that I come across, is often something else in their life that's worrying them, a stress at school or a conflict with friends. And maybe they kind of go to games as actually a solution for another problem. And the challenge can be that we look at games and say, oh, this is the problem that's caused the addiction or caused the excess play. And actually, this is a solution for another part of life. So again, if we close it down too quickly, we can miss out on that really helpful signal as a parent to have a deeper conversation with the child and sort of think, well, what's going on here? Why are you playing too much? What is it that you're trying to escape, or what is it that you're trying to soothe? So again, I'm kind of trying to change the focus a bit from where sort of, why are games the damaging thing, to think, well, what's happening in the wider picture of a child's life?
It seems to me that one of the problems, certainly when I was a parent with boys wanting to play games, that the games are designed to keep you going for as long as possible. And there was always a problem with when do you stop, because there's not a natural pause. The whole idea of the game is to keep you going and going.
I mean, the experience I have is that, a game will play in a round and then you usually finish. And the challenge is then, do you take a moment to think, do I want to play again, or do you dive back into another game? And so you can do some work with the child to sort of say, well, once you've finished and then you've won or lost, just take a moment, stand up, think about what else you might want to do. And if you do want to go back, then you're making a conscious decision. But it's kind of like anything, they're designed to be fun, like a show on Netflix. It pops up the next one to watch straight away.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, it starts playing, and then, whatever age you are, you end up watching the next one, and maybe you hadn't made a conscious decision. So like lots of modern media, I think there's a tendency, obviously it's designed to, encourage you to do something that you're enjoying. But I don't think it does that more than other things. So I think we worry about it more. If you've got a child who reads one Harry Potter book and wants to read the next and the next, we have a sense that, there's something else that's good here. But because games are new, we don't have a kind of a shared understanding of the benefits. And so again, we tend to sort of worry about it and look to limit them in a way we wouldn't limit other things in the same way.
Right. And we're talking a lot about children here, but games have been around long enough now that, there are people who've grown up as toddlers with games, and there are adults now. Do you think that it's a different situation with children? And are there adults who are still enjoying games or maybe abusing them in some ways?
Yeah, we tend to think about games as something that sort of teenage boys play in their bedroom, but kind of the average age of someone who plays games regularly is high 30s. It sort of goes up every year. It's getting towards 40 years old, and the kind of gender mix is actually 50-50. So games are becoming something which is just part of kind of the air we breathe, and a cultural part of how we make sense of the world. But I think our understanding of them and where they sit in society is lagging behind. And so sometimes it can be, we're not equipped in the same way to deal with games. And so we ask sometimes the wrong questions, and we think about sort of screen time and limiting screen time in this area. In a way, in other areas, we think, well, what's on the screen? What's actually happening? And actually doing some more detailed kind of parenting and paying attention. And those kind of blanket worries can drive us to kind of separate parents from children and games, rather than actually have kids and parents, as I was saying just now, playing together. And actually that's kind of the most healthy way forward, is to situate it as part of family life.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who would make the case that especially the kind of modern games we've got now are really just part of the entertainment industry, and have as much merit as a Hollywood movie or a TV series, as you say. There's a lot of content in there, a lot of ideas. Do you think that there are particular types of game that are healthier or less healthy?
I think there are a wide range of games, and that's often, we think about games and it's the ones we see on bus stops or advertised before films that have the bigger budgets for PR, and so that they become, oh, that's what games are. But as you start to dig a bit deeper, as I do with families, kind of what's on offer covers every subject, and kind of you can play, it could be a very relaxed, slow story that you take at your own pace, could be an exciting game where you're playing in a war, like we do, or could be a game where, you look at issues around parenting and sort of growing up and that kind of thing. So you really can find games about all topics, and it's about finding the experience that suits you and suits your child. So again, as a parent, I think it's important for us to kind of get a little bit of knowledge, a bit of literacy about games, so that we can find the games that we think our children will really enjoy. And that's a really positive loop for a parent then, to find a game that you think is good, you introduce your child to it, they then enjoy it, and then you have an equity in this sort of gaming space. So then if you do want to have a conversation about, oh, well, are you playing too long, or what's going on, you're getting a bit cross when you're stopping, you've got that equity in that space to have that conversation, rather than coming in as an outsider just to police it. And then the child is, quite understandably much more likely to listen to you. And as a family, you're just getting a lot more out of this kind of media, which is actually really well shaped for our time. And I heard lots of stories during early lockdown of kids obviously staying connected and keeping in touch with friends, but also finding calm and finding ways to escape and finding ways to kind of deal with the chaotic world when, there wasn't much else that they could do. So I think it's become, a really valuable part of everyday life.
And what about for, I suppose it's particularly adults, but now we carry these phones around with us all the time, and I do think we're kind of addicted to those, by the way. But one of the reasons is because there are a lot of games on those. And I don't play the sort of video type games where you sit and look at a screen, but I certainly play games on my phone or on an iPad, word games, little puzzles, and the Candy Crush kind of games people get hooked on. And I mean, I know adults who spend hours a day doing that.
Yeah, and so we can easily kind of pick up phrases which kind of have a clinical meaning, like addiction. And we don't really mean addiction like a doctor would mean it, because if that was the case, then that our playing of that game would be stopping us going to work or looking after our hygiene, and we would be really detrimental to our relationships. But we kind of mean we're playing it more than we intended, which is kind of a different thing. But, that can be Candy Crush, or it can be games that kind of have no value. But then there's this game Wordle, which is kind of a word search game that is very popular. Yeah. And, that people might say, oh, I'm addicted to Wordle, I play it every day. But they don't really mean it in the same way that, we would mean addiction to a substance or something else, which I think is why it's important to be careful how we label, particularly if we're labeling children rather than ourselves. But I think, that it's interesting, isn't it, that, what games that we enjoy, and it is becoming part of the kind of the wider discourse of how we kind of communicate on social media.
How has that Wordle thing, how has that become such a big thing in such a small space of time?
I think the speed of it is from social media, because you can, when you've played the game and you play it once a day, so it's quite nice because it limits you to play once a day, and many games do that. You get the word or you don't, but if you get it right, you can share on social media how you did it. And that means built into the game, like many modern games, is kind of a social element. So the game itself is quite enjoyable, but also it's the conversation around the game. Oh, have you done it yet today? We say in our family, was it hard? How quickly did you get it? And actually that's reflected in the conversations that children have around the games they play. So they might be playing one game quite a bit, But actually, that drives a lot of interaction and conversation and discussion, like maybe in the playground or at school when they see their friends about how they're doing, what's their current tactics, what's their strategy, did they do well yesterday? And in a very similar way, you see those same conversations, but being had by adults. But they would kind of think that was very different to the experience of, say, playing Fortnite. But actually, there's a lot more in common between, say, Fortnite and Wordle than probably we want to admit, I think.
Andy Robertson, thank you. Gaming expert, author of Taming Gaming. What's your feeling about that then? Are there games that you play every day? Is there a game that you play